See, I'm Dr. Jared Jones. My research specialties are ancient systems of meditation, the cognitive science of meditation, Buddhist philosophy, and the philosophy of science. I'm on a mission to help people understand how to train in meditation in real life. And after 20 years of training in Buddhist meditation and another 6 training in Taoist meditation, and a decade or so studying it also at various levels as an academic, I think humbly I have some idea of how to teach meditation to real people living in the real world. And I've really gone out of my way. For those of you who don't know me, I've really gone out of my way to try to curate, trying to bring together techniques that great lay practitioners, that great practitioners of Buddhism and Taoism who have lived lives as lay people and gained accomplishment, those practices I've tried to bring together and put under one roof. And using my very best ability to understand things and combine things and put them together, I have, uh, how to say, yeah, looks like it's you and me, story point. Oh, kind of a lazy Sunday. Ah, no, Jay is here. Here we go. Everyone's tuning in. It's probably because we were on retreat and we didn't do this for a few days, and so people got out of the habit. But people will turn back up. In any case, yes, once again, for those who don't know me, the name of the game is trying to make meditation accessible to people living in the real world. And uh, all right, that's an interesting question. So I don't know about the frontal left side of the brain, but um, if you train in concentration, one of the things that should happen relatively early on is you should start to experience mental and physical bliss. So um, yeah, I mean, I believe Jay, who went on retreat, had a little bit of bliss when we were doing standing and walking meditation. He was doing the types of meditation that I teach for the first time. So, you know, I mean, and Jay is only a few months into training into meditation. He's done some retreats and stuff, but this is something that's actually very much doable for for real people. And Jay, you tell me, were you when you were doing retreat, did you go somewhere special, or did you just do it at home? I'm pretty sure Jay just did his retreat at home. So yeah, yeah. So I mean, this is something that's very much known in terms of getting pleasure directly from specific parts of the brain. Um, that's not really my thing. As folks around town will tell you, I'm not a physicalist. I mean, of course, your brain has some effect on things because your mind and brain are connected. Yeah. So there's Jay confirming that my retreat was at his house. He's done some other retreats, but he's only been at this a few months. And if you train, you will get the bliss will start to happen. It's a fairly regular thing. But in particular, I was referring to there was a comment that Jay made in retreat that I thought was quite good, where he said, I'm standing I think we were standing at the time, and we were doing full body meditation for the first time. And then afterwards, he said that his body felt totally different, and it was sort of what'd you say, sort of like warm and tingly everywhere. So this is physical bliss. This is physical bliss. And again, it's not that difficult to get these things. These are relatively, yeah, that's right. These are relatively beginner experiences. We talk about, like in the texts and stuff, these aren't considered to be extraordinary accomplishments. They're like, frankly, they're not even that hard to do. Yeah, you feel energized and electric. So this is called normally your body has what meditation texts in the classics say, um, you have mental and physical dysfunction, because from the point of view of someone who's accomplished in concentration, their body and mind work so much better than yours that yours is considered to be dysfunctional by comparison. No, unfortunately, getting high won't do this. You know, I was raised in California. I know what that's all about, and I mean, I haven't done it since I was 16 or something, but it doesn't get you anywhere near this condition. I mean, when you get really good at this, it's actually better than sex. It's better than sex. It's better than drugs. It's better than alcohol. It's better than a good meal. It's better than your favorite television show. It's better than winning repeatedly at video games. It's better than all types of conventional enjoyment because you're bringing the thing that gives you enjoyment, you're bringing it under control. So instead of having to use something else to bring the enjoyment, which is really unreliable, by the way, and causes side effects and problems, this doesn't do that. Mm. Right. Well, there's nothing wrong with intimacy with your partner, and but certainly the way that you experience pleasure will change if you train a lot in meditation. Because if you can make your mind extremely calm and extremely lucid, that's it's so much more enjoyable than the temporary burst of pleasure you get, which is actually quite short, relatively speaking. Uh, Quite short, relatively speaking. Okay. So Rado, I do my best in the sit and see sessions, which is what we're in now, to do questions related to people's personal meditation practices only. I am happy to answer. I am happy to answer any questions you might have more generally if you put it in the comment section. Not in the chat, but in the comments for the video or somewhere else. I'm happy to answer it there, or you can reach out to join the Discord or reach out to me on Facebook, or I also do open Q&As. But these sessions, I answer questions for a few minutes and then we do our meditation practice. So we're going to start our actual practice in a few minutes. I'm not familiar with the tag argument, just to get that conversation started, though. Yeah, yeah. I mean, your mind will change a lot. And if you do the techniques, Jay, that we were doing in retreat, if you do Mahamudra practices, your your mind will change so much. And then just to give you a little taster, uh, there are two other layers of your being. There are two other layers of your being that I do very, very little with. Yeah, Rado, it's no big deal. No big deal at all. Happy to have you here. But I've tried it in the past, and if I start answering anything that's not related to meditation in these sessions, then they become like a free for all. And then I spend an hour talking, and we don't do any practice, which is not good. Okay. Uh, all right, all right. So there are three layers at least to your being, right? You have your mind, the mental layer. You have the vitality layer, which we could call chi, or there's a bunch of different things that are sort of somewhat subtler than physical stuff. But those rely upon, and being able to access those reliably rely upon having a lot of relationships built up in the body. So, for example, if you train in internal Chinese martial arts, where you're learning to use, you know, basically you're learning to use energy stuff to do stuff, to be as vague as possible. Um, you have to build up the huge numbers of connections in the body that are not unusual, but they're there, but you don't notice them and you don't use them normally. Like really long chain connections between your hands and your feet, for example, or connections that if you start twisting the hand, lead into the shoulder, lead into the spine, lead down through the leg, lead down to the foot, and so on and so forth. So there are different ways that you can connect up the tissues through twisting, through stretching, through pulling, from the center of the abdomen. You can there's a sort of a sac at the lower bottom of the abdomen. You can learn to pull that in, and it pulls the different parts of the body in, and you can learn to expand it, and it pushes the various parts of the body out. There's all sorts of, for lack of a better term, quite interesting things you can learn how to do, and this prepares the body to do work with the vitality, the vital energies of the body. If you don't have some of that stuff built up, if the body itself is not built up in a particular way, you can't you can't do that next layer. So, for example, in the way that I teach standing practice, for those of you who are joining the Lohan course, you'll notice that the way I teach standing practice is preparing you to do qigong and neigong and basically internal arts. So that way of standing actually starts to build up more vitality in your system. Your system will become more rich with the type of connections that allow you to do this kind of stuff or begin to do it, etc., through that kind of standing. Nice. Glad to hear that, Jay. You gotta let me know how it goes because I don't get to see the user end of it, and I want to, like, maybe we could get on a call or something, and you could show me what it looks like on your end, and it'd be interesting. So, anyways, then the final layer is consciousness. And consciousness, according to the Nadon system of meditation, which is shared in common between the Chinese Buddhists and the Chinese Taoists, they use different terms and so forth, but they have, as far as I can tell, the same elements. Consciousness um, also has very subtle substances associated with it. And this idea is also found independent of the Chinese stream of these teachings in the Indian and Tibetan tantras. So there's this idea basically that you have a physical layer, then you have a vitality layer that's a little bit subtler than physical, but your ability to use that vitality or vital energy layer depends upon stuff you do physically. By and large, you need to do a lot of physical work to access it reliably and do anything with it. And then, and by the way, that's true even as far as my very limited understanding of Tibetan Tantra, for example. There's just a huge body of physical practices that you're meant to do to make the body work properly for those practices. For example, troll core practice, if I'm not mistaken, normally the daily commitment is something like 2 hours for like a couple of years while you're preparing the body to get it to do all this other stuff that you want it to do, right? Or the what is it? The yogas of Naguma. So um, maybe some of you can sense then why I'm trying in the most limited way possible in my way of teaching to have you do standing properly, because that proper standing will start changing the body in such a way that it's better for all of these other practices. In any case, the Lohan system is designed explicitly to make the body and the energy system and all those intricate relationships that allow you to access subtler and subtler layers of your being. It's the whole thing is designed to do this. And then, because you don't want to die along the way, if somebody like is robbing you for your money or something, you don't want to just be helpless, because if you die in the middle of your practice, that's not so good, right? So Lohan also has a martial art in it. So then you have a way to defend yourself at the physical level, just in case. And then you have all the other layers built piece by piece by piece, you could sort of say, from the bottom up. Very interesting. Anyways, so then the final layer, the subtlest layer, is consciousness combined with the subtlest energetic or vital layer of your being. And so you find this idea in the Nadon systems called shun, right? Shun is not just consciousness, it's consciousness and the subtle substances associated with it. And then um, in the Tibetan tantras and so forth, in my understanding, Rigpa is like this, or Osel, which are, as far as I understand, are compatible terms. So the Shaolin Nadon system takes you through this sort of progression where you're gaining access to and ability to use and ability to experience more and more and more layers of your being. So just to work sort of forwards rather than backwards, not from subtle to coarse, but coarse to subtle. First, right now you have a body you don't even know what it's made of. Like physically, you don't even know your own body. You don't know where your muscles are. You don't know where your skin is. You don't know where your bones are. You don't know where your organs are. You don't know where, right? Because you have no awareness of where they are in the system. And so through a series of exercises like silk reeling, muscle tendon changing, bone marrow washing, Neigong practices, etc. You learn how to make the mind soak into the body while building up these various connections that allow you to do things like Qigong, where you can work directly with vital energies. Then, through various Qigongs, you're sort of working with, for lack of a better term, the least subtle types of your intricate connections of your being, and then subtler and subtler and subtler until you're accessing consciousness and the subtle substances associated with consciousness. And speaking as humbly as I can from my own experience, um, I'm an academic. I've spent 15 years in academia, on and off, training and things. I have all of the skeptical tools of academia in my head. If something is BS, I have no problem at all going, you know what? Like, even to my teachers, I'll be like, if you find recordings of me in classes and things, sometimes the way that I talk on here is more or less, even though I have tremendous respect for my teachers, is more or less how I ask questions in real life. I'm like, okay, so this energy thing, is this nonsense or is this a real thing? Like, what is, So, having now done 6 years of practices related to things like qigong, neigong, working with this idea of shen, and that is common between Tibetan tantras, Taoist neigong, and I think also Shaolin neigong, which is more like Buddhist neigong. All of these things are quite tangible and accessible, and the experiments that I've done with them to see if it's sort of just a psychological thing or an actual real physical thing in the world. As best I can, applying the skeptical tools that I have as an academic, I found them to be real things, not just useful psychological stuff. So when you can access all the stuff making up the body, or increasingly, then you start building up these intimate connections between the body and the energy system. And then the energy system becomes more available. Then you start doing things with that. And then because of that, your what's happening with your mind becomes so much easier to detect, because check this out. Every time your mind moves, energy that's associated with that consciousness also moves, which means that when your mind generates an object, an intention, when it moves here, when it moves there, it's not just awareness that's moving, there's some aspect of your vitality moving also. And so the more aware you become of that, the more aware you become of your mind and the movements of your mind. And therefore, through taking control of this next aspect of your being, having taken control largely of your body, now you can have even greater insight, awareness, and capability with regards to the mind aspect. It's very interesting, right? It's really, really intelligent. It's one of the most intelligent systems I've seen for working with your being that I've ever encountered. And there's a bunch of different versions of it. So yeah, experientially verifiable is right. You build it up from experience. You build up the confidence that, oh, I thought that part was like an analogy or something, and it's not. This term chi or ki is really misunderstood because it's a term that covers like a range of stuff. Chi can mean literally blood, or the movement of your physical body, or the connections between parts of your body in relationships, or the fact that your body breaks down food and turns it into actual physical energy, right? That can be called chi also, or ki. But then below that, there are subtler and subtler kind of layers to stuff that's going on that you can also work with. And if you work with that, then weirder stuff starts to happen. To again be pretty vague about it. But yeah, from my experience, the adding this layer to your practice is very, very helpful. So how can emotion be utilized to reach peak of any emotion or feeling? Generally speaking, emotion in the system that I train people in falls under rumination meditation. So that's foundation 5. So when you learn to take control of your emotions, you do so through using observation and reason mostly. You look at how things are, and then you connect the dots with reasons that are valid reasons. And this leads you to a new attitude, a new experience, a new emotion. And yeah, I mean, not just my opinion, there's some pretty good cognitive science on this. If you train in loving kindness, for example, you can make your loving kindness so impossibly huge that it doesn't fit on the normal bell curve for human empathy anymore. I mean, it's way out here somewhere. So, yeah, you can achieve incredible peaks in terms of your emotional, yeah, metta, loving kindness. You can achieve unbelievable peaks of positive emotion, which is part of the Buddhist path. People think that Buddhism is like this boring, non-emotional thing. It's not. It's not. You're meant to use every layer of you to take you somewhere. Does this make sense? You're using every layer of you and aiming at all the same direction. So your intellect, your thinking mind is taking you this way. Your emotions, your feelings taking you this way. The way that you use your awareness in the absence of conceptual thought taking you this way. Your energy body taking you this way. Your physical body, same way. You see? So more and more and more, in terms of if you go into the most advanced practices, and if you go into the most advanced practices, then even the things that are going this way, if you orient them the right way in your mind, you turn them around so that even though they would go this way if you didn't use them the way you are, you sort of grab them and drag them along this way too. So that now even the things that aren't good are taking you further down the path, which sounds totally insane, but it's not. You can get a sense of this by looking at Mahamudra, for example, where it doesn't matter what appears in front of your mind. If you can pull the mind back and observe the contents of consciousness, the fact that you're doing this instead of this means that just seeing things appearing here without getting involved in them is taking you further down the path. So, whatever appears here, even if it's things that would normally drag you the wrong way, are taking you forward. So, there are more advanced practices where you can take not everything, but almost everything that is dragging you the wrong way, and you can take it forward instead, which again is just unbelievable. We really are dealing with the geniuses of working with yourself here. Even if it turned out that you died and that was the end of the road, this would still be worth doing because the geniuses of working with yourself to have the most incredible, interesting life that's of filled with meaning and purpose and joy and connections with others that are worth having have shaped these systems and built them into something that's worth doing, even if none of the rest of it was true. But obviously, I think the rest of it's also true, which makes it even more worth it. Okay, we've hit 9:30. Let's do some practice. Yeah. Okay. Maybe this will help. I have my halo turned on. There it is. All right. So let's just start with some standing practice. So, in terms of standing practice, for those of you who are in retreat, you already know what it's all about. For those of you who are relatively new, the best thing to do, the best thing to do is if you think about your hand between the pointer finger and the middle finger, you have the ball of your hand there. Just behind the bony part, where you start to feel fleshy bit there between the two first fingers of the hand. Likewise, on your feet, on both sides, you have a ball of your foot that's sort of bony, and then you have a fleshy bit just behind there. So you're going to place your weight on that fleshy bit just behind the ball of both feet and point both feet forward and have your feet somewhere between shoulder distance and hip distance apart, depending upon where is comfortable. Okay. So then you're going to take your hips, and instead of having your back big and rounded like this, you're going to take your tailbone, which would normally sort of be arched like this, right? If your back is arched, and you're just going to take the tailbone and just angle it down a bit, so you don't lose the arch of the lower spine entirely. You're not going like this, but you just let the weight of the hips fall down between your feet, so that the tailbone ends up pointing down. Now, when you do this, you have to let the weight come fairly far forward. Otherwise, if you're here, you'll end up going like this, leaning back. You'll go like this, which is not right. So watch my weight when I sink. See how far forward I come? And you have to do this, otherwise you don't end up straight. Watch, if I come back here, then I'm off balance a bit. So you want to be here. Okay? And then with the head, just let the head, almost as if someone had grabbed you by the back third of the skull on the hair and was lifting you up. Just let the head sort of float up, lift up, drop the chin slightly. And the idea there is really that you're opening that joint at the top of the back of the neck. Don't pull your head backwards like a military person. Keep the natural curve of the upper neck, but let that upper joint open by just lowering the chin a bit and letting the neck sort of float up. And through doing this, it'll feel strange at first, but the whole spine will feel like it's getting stretched like this, up and down. And it's gentle, it's not intense. Okay? Now, and at least in my way of doing this, for the sake of making it easy for your brain, take your hands here and just open them very gently and place them on your thighs, not completely to the side, not completely to the front, but about 45 degrees, and just touch your middle finger to your thighs. And you can let your elbows flare out just a bit. Now from here, this is the position in which you're going to stand. And in this position, the whole body is connected up by being slightly stretched everywhere, just gently and very slightly stretched everywhere through the force of gravity, mostly. So, in our standing posture, we're now going to only keep the minimum amount of attention in the body required to not fall over. And then you're going to place your attention on the breath. So, bring your awareness to one of the nostrils, wherever you feel the most intense sensations. When you find those sensations, place your attention there with great intensity, as if your life depends upon it. We're only going to be doing this for a short time, and the classics say you should bring your mind to the breath for this kind of practice with extremely great intensity. And this is to counteract the force of great distraction trying to pull your mind off the object. So, to aid in this effort, we're also going to count so you can visualize the numbers and say them in your mind, or you can just say them in your mind. But between the out breath and the next in breath, count from 1 to 7, 7 back down to 0. And you can move your body a little bit on 0 if something becomes uncomfortable, but other than that, don't move at all. Here we go. Let's begin. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, bring the mind to the feet, ankles, calves, knees, lower thigh, upper thigh, hips, waist, diaphragm belt, chest belt, both shoulders, both both biceps, both elbows, both forearms, wrists, palms, first knuckle joint, second, third, fingertip, your neck, face, and skull more generally, and up to the back third of the top of your skull. Now, from that point, feel the skull, joint between the neck and the skull, neck, shoulders, biceps, elbows, forearms, wrists, palms, first knuckle, second, third, fingertips, the upper chest, diaphragm belt, waist belt, hips, and pelvic region, upper thigh, lower thigh, knees, calves, ankles, heels, arches, balls of the feet, and toes. Feet, ankles, calves, knees, lower thighs, upper thighs, hip joints, pelvic region, waist, diaphragm belt, chest belt, shoulders, biceps, elbows, forearms, wrists, palms, first knuckle, second, third, fingertips, the neck, joint between the neck and the head, and the skull. From the top of the skull, run the mind very slowly down the spine until you get to the waist. Not the hips, the waist. From the waist, let your mind move into the lower abdomen. And then, without stretching the lower abdomen artificially or breathing in any extra air, just let the breath become low. And let's do a few breaths just to settle the mind. Jans, welcome. Hmm, like I'm pretty comfortable sleeping. Someone adds, yeah, if you do body scanning meditation, it'll be very easy to fall asleep. This is a known thing, which is part of the reason that it's good if you're trying to make the mind extremely calm. Also, why it's really bad if you're trying to make the mind more lucid. So you need to use it at the right time. You see, a meditating mind should be stable and lucid. Of course, you'll go through different phases in your training where you can't help it. You're trying to make the mind more stable, and until it's stable, you can't really work on it being too lucid, or it becomes unstable again. And so you'll go through periods where the mind's a little bit more dull. But if you use the right techniques at the right time, you start with intense breath to make the mind cool where you want it. And then you take the mind and you do body scanning. Why not do it in a standing position? Oh, in a standing position, now you're doing your scanning, and how to say, it's uh it's a lot more difficult to fall asleep if you're standing up, first of all. But in a standing position, the mind is more alert, more awake. And then you switch over to full body meditation, which has a tendency to make the mind lucid again. as some of you know, because you've been doing this practice for a while again. So now you have lucid mind that's calm and stable. And you're just along the way, just for kicks, you're developing it, you're developing these minds in a standing position and a walking position so that therefore, when you start to go out into the world, you can apply your meditative skills. Much more difficult. Sometimes people say, I'll bring up, I'll say, well, what are you going to do when your boss starts yelling at you if your only practice is meditating on the breath? You're going to start meditating on your breath? And I usually chuckle a little bit, but one gentleman quite seriously said, "Well, yeah, that's what I'm going to do." And with respect, maybe he'll find his way here, and he'll disagree with me at some point. A pretty serious Theravadan practitioner, and from what I could tell, is a pretty well trained guy, a pretty serious practitioner. But here's the thing: as I've mentioned before, if you could actually pool your awareness on the breath, and your boss started yelling at you, for example, and you pooled your mind on your breath and you were standing up, you'd fall over because the awareness of your body would disappear and the vision would disappear and the hearing would disappear. You wouldn't even hear your boss. You'd be laying on the ground in a pile. So you only think you can use meditation on the breath for what you're using it for because you can't meditate on your breath. If you could, I mean, here's the other thing: if you get good at training in concentration, your breath is going to slow down. So breath is a really terrible object for trying to develop deep concentration in the long run because you'll stop breathing. Or if you don't stop breathing, the breath will become like between one time and two times a minute, and it's hard to feel your breath. I know of a practitioner who got his breath down to one breath every 2 minutes. So it's not the best thing for using in real life, and it's not the best object for taking a meditation the distance, let's say. Right. Right. Okay, Jay, so that's a fantastic point. You remember when I said at some point your meditation does you? You don't do your meditation. At some point, and this is what it says in the great Mahamudra text, at some point there's no difference between your formal meditation session and your time off the cushion. In terms of the quality of mind and what your mind does from moment to moment, it's all the same. Your mind is constantly engaged in Mahamudra practice. Your mind is constantly holding the gates open. Your mind is constantly aware of the consciousness gate, and so on and so forth. So, at whatever level is possible, the mind is always continuously engaged so that moving minds and still minds are mixed together. Even when I saw a fantastic interview actually recently. I know a lot of people don't like Sadhguru. I don't really know much about him. I've heard of one person who's quite close to him, and the worst thing that he could say about him was pretty mild. It was sort of like, you know, behind closed doors, he's like slightly not as good as he is in public. But it's like, okay, fine, that's most people. The fact that he can hold it together in public is more than most people can do. And well, anyways, so the point is, I saw this wonderful interview where the interviewer was saying, so I hear you've been training people to remain in the present moment, and I've had this same thought, which is really funny, right? People have this idea that mindfulness is present moment awareness, right? Present moment awareness, being aware from moment to moment. You've never been aware of another moment in your life. Every moment you've ever been aware of has been the current moment, not some other moment. You have no other place to be but the present moment. Even when you think of the future, you're thinking of it in the present moment, and every thought of the future is occurring in the present moment. So even when you're attending to thoughts that are about the future or about the past, that's entirely present moment awareness. There's never been anything but a present moment awareness. So this is another reason why you should reject this idea that mindfulness is present moment awareness, or that ultimately that meditation has something to do with eliminating all of your conceptual thoughts. And in particular, from between like here and next Tuesday or something, but probably for the rest of this lifetime. Do you need to eliminate conceptual thoughts at certain times in your training to do certain things? Yeah. But if you're in the real world, and this, again, maybe if some of you are interested, you can look this up. You know, he was on, Sadhguru was on this podcast, and the podcaster goes, tell me about your mind, blah, 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 something, it must be incredible, so calm and blah, blah. And he goes, no, my mind is much busier than most people's. And I found this so relatable because he goes, a normal person can think about a couple of things. He goes, right now talking to you, I'm attending to like 12 different things at the same time. And I went, there it is. Your intellect, your ordinary intellect, your ordinary ability to attend to different things that need to be attended to without losing track of them, simultaneously working on these things, working them through, thinking them through, should become even greater than it's ever been as a result of training and meditation. You shouldn't become a rock. All of the greatest practitioners I've ever met were unbelievable scholars and intellects. The people that I know who could sit for 8 hours or 16 hours a day had unbelievably sharp intellectual scholarly minds. They weren't like a rock. Oh yeah, Hans, this is the chair. This is the chair to complete the ensemble. Oh. My wife wouldn't let me get anything that didn't match the rest of the stuff in the room, so I had to get this. I wanted to get an ugly office chair, but no. And a thank you video is coming very soon. I'm gonna thank everyone, but thank you, Hans. I believe you chipped in to help me get the remainder of the office set up. I'm on the new desk, which is why I can do stuff like this. See ya. Anyways, so the new desk is here. It's a standing desk, and it's fantastic. So I'm able to do all the stuff I need to do. And if I'm putting in like yesterday, putting in a 20-hour day, I can alternate between sitting and standing. So it's quite helpful. So again, only because of the kind donors was I able to upgrade everything and get it done. And now I think the only thing I need to do is get a better standing mic. Um, because actually, it's funny. YouTube is notifying me of this right now. This headset, while it's incredibly good, only produces stereo sound. So no matter what you do, it'll sound like a little bit like you're on a phone call, even if it's a really good phone call. And especially for the content and the podcasts and everything, I'd like it to be a really enjoyable listening experience. So that's the last thing is a really good mic. But somebody very kind, one of the members of the Discord is a sound engineer, and he's going to help me figure out exactly what I need and how to tune it up. So thank you, Hans, thank you, Jay, for chipping in. A lot of people chipped in to make it possible. So now we're there. Now we're actually doing it. The laptop's working wonderfully. So thank you all for chipping in on that. And I had a bunch of other stuff from the PhD, like a proper keyboard and mouse and stuff. But yeah, there was quite a bit I still needed to get, and I was able to get it all because of your kindness. So now we're almost fully operational. Just one more microphone to upgrade, and that's it. Right. Well, my friends, since there don't seem to be further meditation questions coming in, we shall draw it to a close here. We've arrived at 9:30, the departing time. For those of you who happen on through, I'm going to put the link in there. I'm going to be spamming this like crazy because Neil is a fantastically lovely human being. He's just a wonderful Canadian gentleman. And his course is live. His course is live. It's up. Lohan Palm is rocking and rolling. I have a master's degree in Neil Ripsky now, much to his horror. I've watched I don't know how many read and watched and read I don't know how many hundreds of hours of material on his stuff now. And he is from the time between the podcast and now, I am so much more impressed with him as a human being. Oh, oh, thank you, Blue Jays. That's very kind of you. Thank you, thank you. Glad to have you here. Every bit that comes through really does help. Um, so check this out. Let me tell you a brief story now that I have like a full-on master's degree in Neil Ripsky. You guys ready for this? Since you stayed this long, you get a little extracurricular. So when he was young, um, he got bullied a bit. And so he found like a little thing that said, you know, come to Chinese martial arts for self-defense, something like this. And where he stumbled into was the Jingwu Sports Federation, which is a legendary Chinese organization that around the time of the Japanese occupation of China brought together all of these family systems of martial arts. A lot of martial arts, when you study them in China, Yang style Tai Chi, Chen style Tai Chi, Wu style Tai Chi, for example, they have a family name, Ma style Jiquan, right? So they have a family name because that family kept that art and they didn't anyone outside the family didn't get to do it, or a village kept a particular art, and if you weren't from there or they didn't trust you a lot, you didn't get to learn it, or you learned it up to a certain point and then they didn't teach you the best bits. So Jingwu brought together all of these incredible family artists and said, look at how weak we are as a people when we fight amongst each other and we don't teach each other these things that make us individually strong. I mean, it's hair raising to think about after whatever 4,000 years of people not cooperating in this way. Jingwu was amongst the first organizations that said, we need to stop doing this as a people. We need to come together. We need to teach each other the secrets of each other's arts and make each other even stronger, even better. So Jingwu then was exported, and there was a branch in Canada near young Neil Ripsky. And so he trained at Jingwu for a few years, then he fell on hard times, and like a kung fu movie, okay? Like an old school kung fu movie, he falls on hard times and he's going to have to stop doing everything for a while just to take care of himself. And he runs into who? A lineage holder for Jiquan, for drunken boxing, which has nothing to do with drinking, by the way. It's an internal Chinese martial art. So he runs into a lineage holder for that art, a Chinese gentleman who says, "Oh, you're a Jingwu affiliate. No problem. You can move into my house." Because it's like a family. If you're in, it'd be like if your cousin or something fell on hard times, you'd say, "Hey, come on, why don't you just stay with me for a bit?" Right? So here's this young Canadian kid, you know, I don't know how old he was. I think in his late teens, early 20s at that point. And he moves into this guy's house and he gets trained one-on-one as an insider student in this guy's family art. And from what I've seen of the early days, because I've gone back as far as I can and I've watched him do that art, he was formidable. He was a tiger at like 20, whatever, 23, 24. He was a beast, formidable. If you go back and watch the earlier videos, he was a scary man. So he then starts training in all of these other arts. He wanders through Asia for a while, like again, like some kind, you know, like like that TV series Kung Fu. He's just wandering around, learning from the family arts of various people across Asia. And because he was a Jingwu affiliate, and because he had people who knew him, who could say to some teacher who probably would never teach, you know, some Western guy who wandered in out of nowhere, right? Because he would come in and he knew what to do to introduce himself properly, and because other people made introductions, he got to train with like the most incredible world leading internal martial arts people on the planet. He didn't tell me. This is what's so impressive about him. He didn't tell me any of this. He didn't like hand me a CV and go, by the way, here's all the incredible stuff I've done. Take me seriously. I had to spend 300 hours to figure out who he is. He's so humble. It's heartbreaking. He's heartbreakingly humble. And then I didn't even know how much skill he had. I knew he was skilled because I know someone who's trained with him who said he's full on. But I didn't know for myself. But I went through 17 years of videos and things he's made, and it out of 17 years of videos, I found about 2 minutes of hundreds of hours of material, 2 minutes where he's really showing the types of internal skills that he has from these arts. This is how humble he is. And when I asked him about it, I said, dude, why don't you put up the stuff that you can actually do? He goes, no, I tell my students to turn off my camera when I do those things. So I would put him probably somewhere in the top 20, especially amongst Westerners, maybe the top 10 most skilled Western practitioners of these arts in the world. And very few people know who he is unless they've trained with him or know him from other stuff because he's so humble about all this stuff. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And so the website I put together, he wouldn't put a website like that together for himself. I had to put it together and put all of the stuff he's down in one place. If you look up all the people he's trained with, it's unreal the people that he's trained with and the organizations he's trained with. And he's published with some of the greatest martial arts magazines and so forth in the world. He is like a world leader in this stuff, and he doesn't present himself as being anything special, which makes him even more special. You understand what I mean? So now he wants to pass on this Lohan system, which is another really cool story. So, he he was living near sort of Chinatown, I guess. It must have been in yeah, it was in Canada. So they have a little Chinatown in one of the cities that he was living in. And a friend of his who he had been training with went to a Chinese medical doctor, a traditional Chinese medical doctor, because he had training injuries. And that medical doctor mentioned that for health, he teaches this particular martial art that is a very small lineage that he learned when he was in Guangzhou, China, where he was also a Jingwu affiliate, by the way. He helped open the Jingwu branch of Guangzhou, and I have one of the students from all of this stuff that we're doing here now, who lives about an hour and a half from Guangzhou, and I'm gonna try to get as much information about his teacher from that branch as we can in Chinese and have it translated. In any case, um, so this lineage went from the 17th century southern Shaolin temple, which was destroyed by the Qing emperor. Uh, and there's another really famous guy from Malaysia who's I think Hong is his last name. He teaches Wu Mei and something else. He teaches a couple internal arts through the Martial Man. He also has one of these lineages of internal Chinese martial arts from the Southern Shaolin tradition, where these people were basically scattered to the wind. Southern Shaolin was destroyed, and the great martial artists of Southern Shaolin was scattered to the wind for 300 years. And it's only really in the modern era that their art has been made more widely available again. So Neil is once again, he's inherited this this precious artifact from history through his main teacher, um, Dr. Chen. And so now, um, between him and this other gentleman that teaches through the Martial Man, these are, as far as I can tell, one of very, very small number of streams of the Southern Shaolin tradition that still exist. Neil has one, what seems to be very complete stream of this information, um, in the form of what's called the Southern Shaolin 18 Lohan Palm system, which is an internal Chinese martial art. And very unique because, as we discussed at the beginning, it has a martial art that is an internal Chinese martial art, so you can actually defend yourself in case people attack you. but that's just the tip of the iceberg. It has 6 layers that take you deeper and deeper and deeper into your being, culminating in Nadon practice, on top of your meditation practice, culminating in Nadon practices that take you to the subtlest layers of what make you up, which, as far as I can tell, are the same practices you would do in Tantra, in Buddhist Tantra. But you don't have to have empowerments to do those practices, which makes it, again, very, very unique. You know? And so his kung fu brother introduces him to this Chinese doctor who has this Lohan system, and once again, he and this gentleman, Dr. Chen Qiming, they hit it off, and he becomes an inner door, what's called an inner door student, someone that you teach privately behind closed doors, and you teach them the whole lineage. And before Dr. Chen passed away, Grandmaster Chen, before he passed away, he asked Neil, "Can you please pass on this lineage? Because besides my daughters, you're the only people I've taught the whole thing to, and I want you to pass it on." Or you're one of very few people. He's the only person in the West, I think, that he taught the whole system to. And so he wrote a book while his teacher was alive on the system, and then his teacher passed away. So he was like, right when he met me a couple years ago, he was right in the process of starting to transition to trying to really teach this full on. And it's only through serendipity, because we both have a teacher in common for Taoist practice, that we ended up connecting, and then I helped him make the website for Lohan Palm. So through Lohan Palm, you have one relatively complete, as far as I can tell, system from the Southern Shaolin tradition for training the body, the energy system, and the mind, and then that culminates in the Nadon practices. And because of the way that this lineage survived, it went through the monks who survived Southern Shaolin Temple's destruction in the 1700s. Some of them went to Tibet. This is another really interesting part of this lineage. So some of these monks traveled to Tibet. They taught it to some Tibetans at a particular monastery in Tibet. And we don't know which one now, because the Chinese invaded and destroyed 6,000 monasteries, 6,100 monasteries. So the history is now a bit difficult to get to. But um, this would have been a natural thing to do, right? If you were running from an emperor who didn't like you and wanted you to be dead, to go up into the Himalayas as a Buddhist monk and go stay with other monks would have been a natural thing to do. So it is plausible. Then, after being preserved in Tibet for 300 years, in the 1970s, a group of Tibetan monks traveling from the monastery, which, by the way, is something that they do, again, quite plausible. There was a traveling group of monks who came to my school in the United States when I was, I think, in the 1990s or early 2000s. So this is something they do. They go out, they leave the monastery, they go with a small group, and they sort of go out to teach people and what have you. So the head monk in that group got sick, and Dr. Chen is the person who treated him in China. And then Dr. Chen said, I don't want to charge you anything, because I'm Buddhist and you're a monk, and it's good karma, and that sort of thing. And so the monk said, "Oh, well, then I need to teach you this Lohan thing. Like you're a doctor, you're a martial artist, and obviously we have some kind of connection. So I'm going to teach you this Lohan lineage that I have and bring it back into China." And so he trained with him for years, and then helped found the Jingwu thing, and then moved to Canada in the early 2000s and met Neil, and then spent 20 years, well, 19 years or so, training Neil in the Lohan system. Isn't this incredible? Again, it's like there should be a movie about this. The story of the going into Tibet and coming back to Guangzhou, and from Guangzhou to Canada, and finding Neil, this guy who's like lived a kung fu legend life. you know, Neil traveled all over Asia and did what are called challenge matches, which is a traditional thing that you do. You go to a school where somebody's really well known, and you say, with respect and humility, you arrange it ahead of time and say, "I'd like to fight you to see if your skills are real, and if you win, I want to come train with you and stuff." And so he went around and did these challenge matches with people in Asia. Again, he's just lived this life that's like a storybook. So yeah. Anyways, can't say enough positive about Neil. I love the guy really. Yeah, I mean he's so unassuming. He's just unbelievably unassuming. When he talks, you wouldn't again, I don't know how to say it. You just wouldn't know that he's been through what he has done what he has accomplished what he has because he doesn't ooze sort of arrogance or I know everything, I've done everything. He's just so humble. But I have extremely high confidence considering that he's trained people all over the world already. And you can see in those people, in the videos that I sort of found from over the years, you can see his students gaining real skill. So he has the skills and, even more rare, knows how to teach them to people. That's a winning combination. And living in the modern world, he's a Western guy who understands all of the traditional Chinese culture stuff that's related to the arts that he does, but he's also a Western guy who understands all the Western stuff that has, for lack of a better term, come to inform much of global modern culture. So I'm going to put it this way, and then we'll sign off for the day. I'm going to be going through the Lohan course as he builds it. And he and I, when we get to the meditation portion, I'm going to be adding my material on to prepare people for meditation and to get more out of meditation. And then he's going to put the Lohan meditation stuff on top of my stuff. Again, we're going to build the Lohan temple on top of the 5 foundations. So pretty cool. Then when we go to do retreat, he does full on retreats, you guys. He does 40-hour a week full-time training retreats with people all the time. So we're going to have over the next few years, we're going to start doing retreats where we do Lohan and meditation training. And some of you can finally meet me there if you'd like. And we can do some martial arts, we can do some meditation, and you can watch Neil push me 14 feet across the room for fun. Because why not? uh, okay. Well, everyone, thank you for staying for that. Um, if all of that sounds fun and interesting and worth doing to you, Lohan Palm is linked in this live stream, in the chat, in the description, etc. And I'll tell you this as a final note. These will run out. So these 2 coupon codes, first 50 monthly, the first 50 people that sign up for monthly subscription using that code get the first 3 months half off. First 50 year, let me make sure that's first 50 year and not first 50 yearly. Hold on 1 second. Oh, Lohan. Lohan. What is it? Member space. There we are. Yeah, first 50 year. So first 50 year, if you sign up for the yearly membership, you get a free month. And if you use that code, you get 3 months half off on top of that. So pretty cool if you sign up right out of the gate for a year with that code. And those codes are going to go away probably at the end of the month, regardless of how many people signed up. So it's a good time to jump in. You get a 4-day free trial, 3 months half off. And if you sign up for a whole year, you get another month free. On top of that, once you sign up, you can sign up for the group classes. The group class is going to be 7:30 a.m. Pacific time. So that time, everywhere in the world except for New Zealand, people should be able to be awake and attend at that time, which is why we decided on it. So on Saturdays, 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, Neil is going to lead a group class that'll either be a Q&A or actually training in the art or both. And then we decided, you know what, if we're going to do group class, you might as well record those and put them in an archive. So the group class sign up will also give you access to all of the past classes that have been taught on the various elements of the system. Those will be in an archive as part of the group class monthly monthly sign up thing, right? So pretty cool. Overnight, we sold so many private lessons with Neil that we had to turn off the private lessons for time being. So already people are super excited. When are we going to organize retreat? Probably, I would say the first retreat, roughly speaking, next 6 months. Okay, yes. So we did polling before we filmed our first video. We got 40 people who polled to see what general level of interest, oh sorry, what general level of skill people were coming in if they were new. And what we found out is that most people coming in were between sort of like poor coordination skills up to beginner level skills up to average skills. That was like, I don't know, 85% or 90% of people that were interested were basically beginners, right? So we are building the system so that you can start from day one knowing absolutely nothing and go through the whole system as a beginner, and you will be trained up and learn how to do it from the beginning. This is the idea. And then someone was asking today what's actually in the curriculum if you're interested. So I'm going to turn this way so I can read it. I have it on the other screen here. So the curriculum is going to be extensive. So here's the thing. Neil Ripsky, Shifu Ripsky, has trained in Chen style Tai Chi, Yang style Tai Chi, 2 or 3 different styles of Xingyi, I think 2 or 3 different styles of Baguazhang, and also a Qigong and fighting system called Heavy Hands or Weighted Hands, which is an iron palm system. In addition to training in a number of other things that I wasn't able to track down the names of. Oh, yeah, and drunken boxing, which he was quite keen on for years, which is a largely internal Chinese martial art, doesn't have anything or very little to do with drinking anything. And then the 18 Lohan Palm system. So he has this huge repertoire of training system stuff and internal principles that make internal arts work under his belt. He's going to take all of that, the principles, the lessons, the oh, this exercise really does this part well sort of things, right? And build that into the way he trains people in Lohan so that he's going to download his entire knowledge of Chinese internal arts into the training methodologies for making you a good Lohan, 18 Lohan practitioner. So Tai Chi, Jingyi, Bagua, heavy hands, drunken boxing, any element of internal arts that makes the Chinese internal arts work will be baked in to the 18 Lohan method for training so that he can teach everything he knows through one system. So that's the first point. The second point is we're going to start right from the beginning. So the beginning is standing practices and loosening practices because you have to make the body appropriate for Lohan. You have to make the body work like a Lohan body. Then there's going to be silk reeling, which has to do with working the fascia networks in the body, and muscle tendon changing, which is similar, not just working them, but making them extremely strong. And then muscle tendon changing bridges over into Qigong, as does bone marrow washing, which is sort of the next level of, you could say, muscle tendon changing. And those are 2 of the Buddhist classics. If you've ever wondered, like, where did all this Shaolin stuff come from anyway? A monk from India came to China, and the legend goes that he helped establish Shaolin. And there are 2 documents which are attributed to him, at least, the muscle tendon changing classic and the bone marrow washing classic, which have to do with setting up the body and making it perfect for training and meditation. But it also makes you so incredibly strong and resilient as a body that you can do all of the things that Shaolin martial arts people do. The other thing that was baked in early on, they say, is the Shaolin 18 Lohan Palm system, which is one of the foundational types of training that should be baked into all the other all the other internal arts and all of the other um, Shaolin arts. So this is the sort of foundational material from which you build the rest of Shaolin, according to the system. Anyway, so then Shaolin Lohan Palm itself has a standing form and a seated form and a number of other things. In addition to that, there are Doyen practices, which is basically yoga. So it has a whole yoga system that is more or less a Buddhist system, a Budo-Taoist system, since it's shared in common. This also includes self-massage, and then you transition over to more of the energy practices, qigong, bone marrow washing, neigong, although you do neigong right from the beginning, and then you start working on the mind. So in terms of the mind, you have shengong. So shengong is exercises having to do with consciousness. And because Neil also trained in the Thai forest tradition in Ajahn Mun's lineage, nonetheless, I mean, again, like a legend, right? He's going to build in some of his Thai forest Buddhist meditation stuff as part of how he prepares you for the Shaolin stuff coming from Lohan. And then there is the Lohan system that he has, as I said, because it came through Tibet, includes some material from the Tibetan way of training and meditation. So it makes it quite interesting. And then that'll go into Neidan. So the Neidan, I think, is more or less the culmination of the system, which is roughly speaking, is the Chinese corollary to the Tibetan tantric system's completion stage practices. And then we've also had conversations about wanting to include modules for people that wanted to take them, electives, where we would do several things, where you could actually train full on in one of the other arts that he knows, for example. So you could do Yang style Tai Chi as an adjunct to your Lohan, for example. Also, training in ancient Chinese. If we get enough people interested who wanted to learn enough ancient Chinese to be able to read a little bit of sort of Buddhist primary material or Taoist primary material, for example, we're thinking if there was enough interest, we would bring on a scholar from because Neil knows a lot of people who could design a 12 to 24-month course that gives you enough background in that stuff that you could begin to become competent in knowing the basics at least of working with ancient Chinese, which is what all the Buddhist classics are written in China. The Agamas are written in Buddhist Chinese, ancient Buddhist Chinese. And so that would be an adjunct to the philosophical training aspect of the course at some point when we get there, but that's a ways down the road. And we've also talked about, because of his connections, bringing in someone who could design an elective for the course at a later stage of the course for training in traditional Chinese medicine, because there's a lot of traditional Chinese medicine stuff baked into Lohan because it comes through Dr. Chen, who was himself a Chinese medical doctor, right? So for people that wanted to go deeper in some of these aspects, whatever they were, we want to create avenues eventually. So the course week by week with the electives, with all of this stuff, will probably be 8 to 10 years worth of material. It's going to be unbelievably rich, starting from absolutely nothing at all. Let's take you through it. Let's take you through the whole thing, all the way to the end, all the way to the end. Really rich, really incredible, step by step. And in this way, Neil is hoping that he can pass on the entire lineage of stuff that he knows in one big stream. And when you combine that with group classes, individual lessons, and in person seminars and retreats, over the next 20, 30 years, he wants to pass the whole lineage to a few people, so that it won't go out of existence. Because if he dies, it goes out of existence. There's nobody else who, as far as we know, that knows enough of it that they could carry on the whole thing. There are people that know parts of it, or they know all of it, but they don't have the time to teach it. Like Dr. Chen's daughters don't have the time to teach it because they work full time doing other things. So that's the big plan. Over the next 20 years or so, train a bunch of people that get some benefits out of it at whatever level they want to go, and train, I don't know, 50 or 100 people in the whole system so that the lineage spreads out and becomes a thing and doesn't cease to exist, right? So maybe one of you, of the 150 people who have passed through, and maybe the 150 who find this later, maybe you're the one. I hope you are. That's why I'm helping him do this. I absolutely don't want this to go out of existence. Oh man, I think it'd be such a loss to humanity. So when are we going to do retreat? Hans the Cool, sometime in the next 6 months, 8 months will probably be the first retreat, depending on how many people have signed up and what the interest level is. Blue Jay, Blue Eyes. I have a question. I have a friend that might be interested. I worry that he declined because of his back problems. Oh, wow. Okay. So if you get him in and he does some private work with Neil, the entire system was used in traditional Chinese medicine. Most of what it was used for by his teacher in terms of the physical aspect of the art was as physical therapy, basically. He would teach his medical patients as a traditional Chinese medical person. He would say, "Oh, you have this problem with your back or your neck or your shoulder. Okay, you're going to take this part of the Lohan system, this part here, and you're going to do this. You're going to do this motion. I want you to do that 50 times a day, or whatever it is." So the system is this is the thing, you guys. I don't think you understand what these systems are. I mean that with respect because nobody does if you're not involved, but it is a complete system of working with a human being so that if you get injured, you can fix yourself, right? So that if there's a problem, you can sort it out and make the spine work better again. I have a friend who got in a motorcycle accident, broke his leg, had a big spinal issue. You know, I think he had a problem with his shoulder too. I mean, he was jacked up. He's been working with my Taoist teacher now for about a year and a half, and his symptoms from the car accident are way better, or from the from all of his injuries are way better, according to him. You know, he still gets pain, but he says the amount of pain and so forth is less than it was because of doing these kinds of practices. So absolutely, these are compatible. You know, I have a really bad shoulder. My right shoulder is terrible. It's in pain every day. I have a bad hip and lower back. It's in pain almost every day. I have a bad knee. I mean, if it weren't for all these practices that I do from these systems, I think my body would just, I'd probably just end up I'd be in a wheelchair or something, you know? Like my body would be totally just jacked. So yes, absolutely. You can share it with your friend. Uh, at some point, there's going to be partner training material also in the course. So it would be good to have a friend that's nearby who's also training in this so that you guys can do the partner work together. The Baggins 11 asks what lineage I belong to. So I've mainly trained in Geluk Tibetan Buddhist practice, but I've also trained a little bit in Thai forest tradition. And I've also spent about 6 years now training in Dragon Gate Taoism. And I still consider my main lineage to be the Geluk tradition. I take that study and practice in that lineage quite seriously. But I also take my Taoist training quite seriously. The Dragon Gate lineage is quite interesting. You think about like modern times, okay? In modern times, you have people who say, I want to take Buddhism and the best that I can get from Buddhism and combine it with the best of cognitive science. Yeah. They want to take the best of Buddhism and combine it with the best of secular ethics. They want to take the best of Buddhism and combine it with the best of something else we have around right now, right? This is a very common thing that people do. And I think there's a reason to do it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's taking classical Buddhist scholarship and combining it with Western philosophy to see how you work through the latest problems in thought. There's merit to this kind of thing. So in ancient China, I think not ancient, I think it was only about 250 years ago, the Dragon Gate lineage of the Dragon Gate lineage formed a new school called the Complete Reality School, which is now the largest school of Taoism. And in the Complete Reality School, it has the complete reality because they do full-on Buddhist training with Buddhists. So they train in Chan with Buddhist monks. They train in Tibetan Tantra with Tibetan Tantric monks. They train in, whatever, Thai forest Buddhism with Thai forest monks And I have teachers in this stuff who have trained with people like this, right? In their respective lineages. So when they do the Buddhist part of their practice, they train with Buddhists. When they do the Taoist part of their practice, they train with Taoists. When they do the Confucian part of their practice, they train with Confucians. And so they take the complete reality of what is the best of all of these systems, and they take the very best of it forward in terms of their training. And in our particular lineage, there are people who had a lot of experience in Chan Buddhist practice and a lot of experience in Tibetan Tantra pre 1959 Chinese invasion of Tibet. So, you know, quite rich, you could say, in terms of um, if lineage has something to do with carrying forward the blessing of the stuff that comes through these things, right? In terms of how it transforms you to interact with people who have gained accomplishment in those things, then the complete reality school has some of that blessing coming through the Buddhist side from over here, from the Chan lineages, from the Tibetan lineages, from Thai forest, and at least in my stream. So that's what I've been doing. 6 years of that, and and about 20 years of Geluk Tibetan Buddhist practice. I think there was another chat that came through. Oh no, I have a buddy who's trying to blend Theravada and Hermeticism. Felt like it wouldn't quite work. I actually don't know much about Hermeticism. I studied Western esoteric traditions at university, and I actually know some people involved in let's call it Western esoteric practice here in Edinburgh, where I live in Scotland, and I I I don't see a problem with it necessarily. You know, like there's really interesting stuff in Western esoteric traditions. So Western esoteric traditions largely they they aren't as esoteric as one might hope. You know? Uh so to give you an example, the well, I won't be too specific, but some Western esoteric traditions they rely on the power of symbol, for example, but the way they use symbol is like unbelievably rich because it comes from the Middle Ages traditions of putting like these unbelievably complex symbolic relationships in place in terms of art, architecture, word, color, shape. And so using this extremely intricate set of symbolic relationships so that when you see it, it creates change in you. Not because you don't know what it is. It won't do that if you don't know what it is. But if you know what it is, that you use aspects of your body in terms of symbol, aspects in terms of implements in terms of symbol, aspects in terms of ritual in terms of symbol, aspects in terms of art in terms of symbol, and then of course study involving great deal of symbolic meaning. That through working with semiotics, as it's called in Western psychology, that you learn how to pack a lot of transformative stuff into a small package. So it's really sharp. It's like again, it's one of these streams of sort of we could say it's like complete reality, right? It's do you find that in Buddhism, for example? Yeah. Do they talk about it like this? Not exactly. Does understanding this help you understand the Buddhist part of it where they do that? Yeah, I think it does. So, I'm in a weird place as a practitioner, you could say, in a sense, because I am full on Gelug in terms of practice, mainly. But I'm willing to look at anything and really think it through. Yeah, like if you really dive deep, I mean, I'm sure there are some Hermetic people that are doing interesting things if they've been trained in other stuff. But if you really dive deep, they mostly have to do with symbolic meanings or dealing with spiritual powers, and whether or not those powers actually want to deal with you is an open question. You know, I mean, there are practices in Buddhism where you deal with spiritual powers, but I would say, I would say, without saying too much, as I sometimes do, that if you talk to people who do those practices, for example, in Tantra, where you're dealing with other beings and spiritual powers, the things that happen are as tangible and as scary and as blissful and spanning the range of crazy things that can happen in terms of dealing with things that aren't human. Um, and I've heard some very reliable people tell me some things that were very, very interesting in doing practices like that. But I do the Western Hermetics who are relying on whoever that they borrowed from the Egyptian pantheon or whatever, or are they actually making contact with those beings? Are those beings actually doing things? I don't know. How could I know? I haven't seen any. I haven't seen any strong indications that they are. And I haven't heard anyone who I think's really reliable give me a report of something like that, you know? Yeah, for what it's worth. You know, something that I do advocate for actually, Freemasonry is wonderful. It's really wonderful. The Scottish Freemasons and are a really, really fantastic organization, for example. Again, not quite as esoteric as you might hope or think or what have you. But if you wanted something that helps you understand as a Western person, for example, how to transform your character as a Western person who's inherited all the symbols of Western stuff. Symbols that you've probably, well, I don't know where you're living, Baggins, but since your name is Baggins, I'm going to assume that maybe you're living in the West. This is one stream, you could say, of how do you take all of this symbolic stuff that's related to the inheritance we have in Western culture, which historically largely is coming through the Christian biblical tradition, but it doesn't have to be of that tradition necessarily. I don't know how to say that quite right, but it's coming through the tradition, but it's more than just the tradition. There are all sorts of symbols, tools, ways of working with semiotics that they have in their tool belt that perhaps for some people, because you've been raised in the West, because you're a Westerner, because also again, because I think there are still branches where it's female Freemasonry, but if you're a young man, to have a group of other men who are there simply because they want to transform their character and have a fraternity of other men to learn how to be a better man amongst. Like these are values that we need actually. We need as men, for example, to learn how to be a better man. And there are tools that have worked for people for 500 years in the cultural context in which we live. Wouldn't it be cool to know what those are? You know? Wouldn't that be interesting? It's like maybe worth knowing? And then same thing. The female Freemasonry is doing the same thing on the side of women. And so anyways, yeah, there are all of these systems are they have tools for working with yourself. And depend if you're the right kind of person, it can be really helpful to understand what those tools are because through that lens you can understand more of your own Buddhist practice, for example. I think I understand I think I'll be right with you, food addict. I think I understand my Buddhist practice better than I ever have because I know stuff about other things. Again, what I tell people is marinate in your tradition for 5 years, 10 years, go full on, really study it hard with people who know what it is as best you can. And then when you start looking at once you have tunnel vision for your tradition, right? So now you're looking through just the lens of your tradition, but you have all of these issues arranged in that tunnel. And then you open a little air pocket over here and you look at it like this. Right? And you go, "Oh." I didn't know I could see it from this angle. What about that? Oh, and now you've gained more information about this piece than you had before. What about symbol? What about semiotics? What is it about symbolic stuff that has so much power that simply describing something in words doesn't have? Like if I show you this and you have an understanding of subtle impermanence and coarse impermanence and selflessness and emptiness and the suffering of samsaric rebirth, you can go bang and call up 14 different understandings that are path minds, minds that actually take you down the path with one symbol that would have taken you hundreds of words. So this is the power of symbol. You know, like the statue of a Buddha has, if it's made properly, it has all of the major and minor marks of a Buddha. Anyways, okay. Do I have much experience with transcendental meditation? I don't. From what I understand of it, you do mantra practices and then you transition to meditation on consciousness, which is a tried and true technique. It works very well. So from that standpoint, I think transcendental meditation probably works quite well. There's a bunch of studies that have been done on transcendental meditation and say it's extremely effective. The only thing I would add to that is if you had something like intensive breath practice, like I teach it, and body scanning and Mahamudra practice, then you could take those and make your mantra practice even more profound, even more quickly. And you can make the benefits of that practice much more through combining it with a bunch of other tools that you know, if you have the right tools that to work with yourself, things can happen more quickly. That's all. So if you've been doing transcendental meditation and you're having some success making the mind less busy, you might notice that now that the mind is less busy, it's becoming dull. That's the first thing that happens. So, on the one hand, if you're noticing that you have more thoughts and a bunch of those are more negative than you were expecting, that means that you're gaining some concentration because you've always been like this. You just never noticed. You will have more, you have way more negative thoughts and you have way more thoughts and you have way more emotions than you thought you did. And that's just how it's always been. That's the first thing that should happen to you if you're actually training in concentration. You go, oh, my mind is a mess. So that's a good sign, believe it or not. And then the next thing that will happen is once you gain some concentration, the mind will start to get sleepy, dull, foggy, less intelligent, and you'll go, what the hell is going on? And a lot of people quit around this stage because they go, well, my mind was better before I started this because now it seems like a mess and I'm like tired and my thoughts don't work anymore. And, my mind is like become a total wreck doing this meditation thing. What the hell am I doing? So these are known things that happen, and if you have the right techniques, you can work with yourself to you know stop the negative aspects or reduce them a lot and create a lot more progress a lot more quickly. So this is how I train people. If you were curious, food addict, it's actually why I'm here. I don't want you to give up your transcendental meditation. I want your transcendental meditation to be 10 times as effective as it is right now. Do you understand? I want you to understand what the process of meditation is and have 3 or 4 tools in your tool belt to make your meditation work even better and to know how to deal with the problems that come up in meditation so that you can then go back to your mantra, for example, and have it be even more profound. And then when you transition over to meditating on consciousness from mantra, I want you to have better skills, for example, at taking the awareness of your 5 senses and pulling them in, not just relying on the mantra, which is just brute force, right? You have the mantra going on here in the central mind. Here are your 5 senses. And the mantra is going on here, and you're trying to use brute force by reciting the mantra to pull the awareness in, which will work eventually. And then once it's pulled in, then you start looking at consciousness itself, right? Which is, again, tried and true. Fantastic technique. Really, there's nothing wrong with it, except that it's hard to do in real life because everything in the world is trying to pull you out to the five senses, you know? But there are techniques where you can learn how to tame your five external senses so they don't cause as much problems. And then it's much easier to pull it inside. And if you're using the mantra, sort of like all the better, all the better. It'll give you more control of what's appearing on the surface of the mind. Fantastic. No problem. So if you go to the meditation and mindfulness course, the five foundations course, you can see the techniques that I teach. If that It's all the same material, but if you want to train a little bit more hardcore, go to the school course listed down below. And there's a whole community there. I think there's 20 something people now. And I'm training them sort of full on in these techniques because I'm trying to build a community of about 100 or 200 people who want to train really seriously in these techniques, make a lot of progress, and do retreats and support each other in doing retreats. Um, so if that sounds interesting to you, then the school course is down below. Follow up. If transcendental ideal is contradictory to the ends of Buddhism, do you still feel the symbology could benefit Dharmic practice? Uh, I don't know. The thing is, you have to think like this. Unless a system has gone totally haywire somewhere, which some systems have, they've run totally off to into left field somewhere. But unless something has run totally off into left field somewhere, these all of the most profound systems on earth are ways of actually working with a human being, usually to first make them stable and ethical and have good character in the world, because you need that to do all of this, to make your life more normal, more stable, make your relationships less chaotic. And then once they've carved your character a little bit so that you're not a total mess and your life isn't total chaos, then turning your attention inward and increasingly bringing the mind's awareness to itself until you realize what you are, until you realize the fundamental things making you up as a being. And then at some point, the Gnostic systems, for lack of a better term, the sort of theological systems say, when you touch your soul, you find out that it's God, or you find out it's not separable from God. Well, I might have some questions about what do you mean by that? Can you describe that experience for me? Because when I've talked to Christian mystics, for example, I've told this story before, but one Christian mystic, quite serious. I think he was doing 4 or 5 hours of his Christian practices a day related to his mystical tradition. And on top of that, he was doing retreats. And so he was telling about one retreat, and he said, I was sitting there, and the Holy Spirit suddenly filled my heart, and it sort of filled me up. And then all the colors got really bright, and I felt blissful. He didn't say it quite like that, but he said, I was filled with the love of God, and there was like a feeling of connection with everything around me and love. And I went, yeah, we call that samadhi. you know so if I just take the descriptors and I don't take the theology, I end up with, oh, okay, you had an experience of concentration. It became non-dual. The only rational response to having a non-dual perception that you can't be pulled apart from the world is that you feel deeply connected to and therefore loving in regards to the world. And so the next thing that should come up is this loving feeling. And if you've already been training a bunch and your mind's very calm and you have some concentration, that fills you up completely. And of course, you're filled with bliss. And when the winds move in the interior channels of the body, if that's never happened, it feels like some external presence is moving around in your being, right? Yeah. We call this training and concentration. No problem. So I think these systems they're all these systems are ways of working with yourself, and the legitimate ones are getting to some of the same places. They're talking about them in different terms. And then there's the question is, okay, well, if we're all training in ethics and character and concentration, because those seem to be in common with all the, let's say, mystical traditions and Asian meditation traditions, as a general sort of description. Well, if we have all that in common, roughly, because there are differences, but roughly, then we share this struggle in common of trying to have good ethics, have good character, and training concentration for us lay people, at least, in the real world, which is why I'm able to teach meditation in a non secular, universal way, because we share basically everything up to this point. Then the question is, once we have states of concentration, both either formless meditations or form meditations on an object or on something that has no form, right? Like your consciousness has no form. So once we've generated some concentration on these kinds of objects, what do we do? Well, if you're a Gnostic, supposedly you just meditate on being in union with God, whatever that is, right? Does that mean that I mean, if you meditate on formless consciousness, it'll seem like your consciousness is everywhere and is loving and blah blah blah. Maybe that's what they mean. Maybe that's what they're calling God. We call that the jhana of formless consciousness or the formless jhana of consciousness, right? It's hard to say what they're touching down on. But if it's something real, then it has to be some if it's something they're doing, right? They can't touch down on something unreal. So it has to be some real thing that's part of what's making up our beings and that we have access to. Anyways, I know this is probably getting a bit too out there, but the overall point is that regardless, all of us as human beings have to develop certain cognitive skills. Well, sorry, first we need a basis of ethics and good character. And then on that basis, we need to build up certain cognitive skills that lead to concentration, states of concentration. From those states of concentration, we have formless options, and we have options where we're meditating on basically an object that has some kind of shape or color or sound, something like this. And depending upon which route we're taking, the types of experiences we have will be a bit different. Metta, for example, which is why it's not a beginner's object, is a formless concentration in which you've generated your consciousness into universal loving kindness that all sentient beings might have happiness and causes of happiness, and that you're taking personal responsibility to bring about the happiness and causes of happiness for all sentient beings, down to the fleas. And then with single pointed concentration, not seeing stuff and hearing stuff and, single pointed. So your body disappears in concentration if it's single pointed. The only thing that exists is your mind in a completely formless state of loving awareness for all beings, spreading out across all space. Okay. So that experience is going to be different than meditating on a mantra where you're bringing your awareness to the sound, right? Which it's not quite as doesn't have as much crunchy form as like visualizing a Buddha or something, but it's a sound in your mind, roughly. Yeah. And your mind is formless. And so if you focus on the sound long enough, you can start to gain an experience where, the thing that's being aware of this sound isn't actually located in space in the same way as other stuff. And then you sort of let the mantra start to go away and you meditate on consciousness. So this is another pathway towards formless concentration, starting with an object that has form. Right. Well, we've gone quite a distance. I didn't know we were going to go this far today. Uh, hey Paul, welcome. Yeah, what a heck of a time to tune in after the conversation we were having. Straight from the conversation we were having into Christian stuff, right? But then think about this, right? Since we have a Christian gentleman in the room who's asking about meditation, or someone at least interested in Christian styles of meditation who's entering the room. So think about this, right? Imagine this. Just imagine, right? You're driving, you're listening to music, you get to the destination, and you go, how the hell did I actually get here? I can't remember the places I passed. I can't remember the turns I made, you know? So when concentration pools, because your mind has limited bandwidth, and its bandwidth is spread out over five senses, right? And it's spread in the central mind. But it's like Wi-Fi. If you're streaming 5 HD images and well maybe 6 HD programs, and that's all the bandwidth that you have available, then if you put more bandwidth over here in vision, you have to take it from here to get it. You have to, these need to become pixelated 1980s, 320p, so that this one can become 8K. Does that make sense? And if you just keep going, everything else disappears, and all that's there is this image in 10K or 12K, ultra, ultra, ultra HD, beyond real, right? Beyond even what human eyes can produce, realer than real, right? So, like this, if just like your senses gray out a little bit when you're listening to music really intensely and jamming out driving somewhere, if you train in concentration on the breath and you get, this is why I do intensive breath so powerfully, it's supposed to pull the bandwidth from the other senses so that this is all that exists. Yeah, you have to turn the radio down to see better. That's right, because it's the hearing is using more bandwidth, and it's pulling it from vision like this. So when you use extremely forceful intention with foundation one to pull the awareness to the breath, the rest of the body should become, for lack of a better term, sort of 320p, like pixelated 1980s version of the body where you can barely feel what's there. And then eventually you can't feel it at all. Likewise, vision will become pixelated in gray, sort of gray and first, and then it'll become almost black, and then it turns off. And the hearing will become less and less and less until you can't hear anything. And so think about it like this. Imagine that you were visualizing an apple. I always use an apple for some reason. Imagine you're visualizing an apple, so you see it in front of you. If your concentration became completely all consuming, the body would disappear, smell, taste would disappear, vision would disappear, hearing would disappear. From your perception, from the point of view of your perception, the only thing that would exist in the entire universe would be this apple and the awareness that's knowing the apple. That's all that would be there experientially. And everything that you normally think about as you would disappear for a period of time. Okay? So this with an apple, not so profound. But now imagine you're doing your Christian prayers, for example, or your Buddhist prayers, your Hindu prayers, and you have a feeling of deep devotion and faith that comes up, right? Now, consciousness is a formless thing. If you look at consciousness, it doesn't have a color, doesn't have a shape, doesn't have a smell, doesn't have a taste, it doesn't have a tactile sensation. So consciousness, when you sort of observe it in meditation, it's called formless. So unlike the apple, the thing that's looking at the apple, it doesn't have any positive qualities. It's sort of like space that knows stuff. This is how it's described in the text, and humbly, I'll tell you from my experience, that is in fact how it is. So imagine this: you're doing your Eastern Orthodox prayers, or you're doing your Christian prayers, you're doing your Buddhist prayers of homage, and sort of like visualizing the apple and putting everything there, you pull all the awareness inside to consciousness. Or for the person who's doing transcendental meditation, just like you pull the awareness inside onto the sound of the mantra. So you pull the awareness in to the subjective condition of deep devotion until everything else disappears and you're in a formless condition where the only thing that exists is a formless state of consciousness spread out over space in a condition of devotion. Tell me that and from that perspective, because subject and object, you can see that the mind is generating the devotion and the devotion isn't separable, can't be pulled apart from the mind. So this is called non-duality, right? That you can see directly that they're not two things, which is extremely profound by itself. When you have those experiences in the beginning, because this is not an expert's experience, this is a beginner's experience of just non-duality with vision or something, which I teach people how to do all the time. When you do it with consciousness and you're meditating on devotion or faith or loving kindness or what have you, and everything else disappears, imagine how much more profound that's going to be than just like saying your prayers. I said my refuge today. I said my 200. I said my rosary of Eastern Orthodox prayers today. You know, I said my Hindu prayers today. Imagine if your concentration was so powerful, you became devotion during your prayer. Think about how much more incredible, powerful, transformative that will be than the other thing. Where the only things that exist are your mouth moving and you can hear the sound, right? So there's a little bit there, but your mind is mostly like 97% absorbed. Once you get good at this, this is what it's like. Like mostly absorbed on the consciousness itself, right? So here's the five senses. We've turned off these three. There's a little bit left of hearing and tactile so that you can do the prayer. And then the rest of the central mind, all of this is generated in a state of devotion and is unified with that devotion, right? Unbelievable. And this is blissful too, by the way. So you have these unbelievable rapturous feelings, like the great Christian Gnostics talk about, you know, the rapturous feelings. Like when you see all those paintings where they're like this, where they're looking upward and they're leaning back, that incredible bliss that all the Renaissance painters put on canvas, right? This is it. This is how you do it on purpose instead of on by accident. You see? And this is before we even start talking about whether or not there's a God or whether or not like but we haven't even talked about it. We don't even have to talk about it. That's your business. Because the thing is, if you can do this, in a sense, it's actually not as important whether or not there's a God. From my perspective as a Buddhist, your destination in terms of rebirth has now become so much better because you can do this. And even before you're reborn, all of your relationships will be better because you can do this. Your life will be so much better because you can do this. You'll treat your mother better. You'll treat your father better. You'll treat your boss better. If you are the boss, you'll be a better boss if you can do all this. So there will be this wave of benefit coming out from you. That's what a saint is. Where naturally, as they walk through the world, others just become better. Others are benefited. They react properly and appropriately to what's happening, and others are benefited because they exist. Like before they've even tried to do anything in regards to truth or meaning or just simply because of their being, others are benefiting because they're not adding to the problem anymore. They're not hurting others as much. You see it? If you could generate incredible devotion, and that devotion led immediately to ethics and good character because of what you had connected devotion to make this a little more down to earth, and you could generate the mind into profound devotion in a fraction of a second because you trained in it a couple of hours every day, and that devotion immediately connected to I need to be ethical, I need to be kind, and I need to be loving, I need to be this, I need to be the boom, 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 boom. And those qualities came up as soon as you generated the devotion. Everyone around you will be benefited by your existence for the rest of your life before we even talk about any specifics about what you decided to do, because that mind's also peaceful. That mind has no inclination to hurt anyone, so it's not the type of faithful devotion that's going to make you do bad things. because concentration involves a certain kind of flexibility, ease, grace. You look at the situation, and because the mind is mostly non-conceptual, it takes in a huge amount of information. Instead of, you want to know why non-conceptual states of mind produce better decisions? Look at my bookcase behind me here. If your mind focuses on this, it misses all this. If your mind can take in the whole bookcase, now this is used to make the decision. If the mind can take in the whole screen, then it gets me on the screen. You also get me as part of the picture, but you don't miss the entire bookcase. You don't miss the mirror. You don't miss the chair. You don't miss the fireplace. You don't miss the carpet. So the non conceptual awareness taking in the entire sphere of awareness has so much information that a person whose mind that zooms in on, let's see if I can do it, zooms in on this book doesn't get. And that's how most people do it. They zoom in like this, and then they're thinking about this one little aspect here, right? But a mind that can zoom out and be in a state of concentration goes and sees the whole thing and gets your, for my apologies, but gets your bullshit out of the way. And so then when the thought comes about what to do, it's based on this, not this, not this little thing you've been ruminating about over here. It's based on this whole picture. Grace. I don't know where the information came from, he said. I was standing there and it hit me like a bolt of lightning from above. I looked at it and I just knew what to do. By grace. You see? This is why it's useful to study other traditions. If you take away some of the presuppositions, I will give you 97% of Christianity, and you can keep it just as it is. You can have it, you keep it just like it is, no problem. There's a few things I need to pick a bone with you about, but in a sense, that 3%'s not my business. If you're Christian, that's your business. But all the rest of it, if you can train the awareness to work in a different way than it works, then this thing called grace, I think, can start to happen. One of my students who's not hasn't trained in much meditation, he did a retreat, I think, like 3 or 4 years ago in the Thai forest tradition. And then he started doing my stuff, was doing it for about 10 days. And he said, I was doing Mahamudra style practice, which is becoming aware of as we're talking about, the whole visual field, for example, the whole auditory field. And he said, I was talking to some other students at my medical school. And he said it was really weird because I was standing there listening to them and I wasn't thinking anything. And I thought, sort of panicking, I'm not thinking anything. So I'm not going to know what to do or what to say. And he said that because his awareness was so calm and because he was so aware of what was actually happening instead of being caught up in his head, that when it was time for him to say something or know something or do something, the information just bang was immediately there. And it's not magic, it's just you're getting a lot of the BS out of the way and you're taking in a lot more information. So to now rewind the conversation all the way back, your intellect becomes stronger from this, not weaker. Your ability to think things through becomes stronger. Your ability to have multiple lines of meaning and reasoning and multiple layers of stuff related to each other built up into one picture in your mind that becomes incredibly complex and powerful becomes even better, not worse. I mean, what do you think a tantric mandala is? It's an entire map of training towards enlightenment, with every implement having symbolic power, with every layer, every color, every being, every gesture, every single aspect bringing path minds into the thing you're doing in one image. And some of the tantras, I think Kala Chakra, I can't remember what it is exactly, but it has something like, I don't know, like 260 deities or something in the mandala. And each one of them, again, is this incredible, sort of like Jesus on the cross. You go, this symbol means a being taking all the suffering of others onto themselves. And also has all these other layers in the representation. Likewise, a deity representation in a visualized image has hundreds of layers of meaning. And in certain tantric practices, you are surrounding yourself with hundreds of deities, each with hundreds of layers of meaning. Every color, every gesture, every approach that they're taking, everything they're standing on, everything, the entire environment is like hundreds of thousands of layers of meaning, and you know what they all are. And a great practitioner knows what they all are simultaneously. So your ability to hold multiple lines of thought goes from the ordinary one, like we have, to a person who can hold hundreds of thousands of lines of thought at the same time. Do you think that'd be a helpful capability to have? And you wonder why things like tantra are faster. It's not magic. It transforms you more quickly because number one, you're using way more of your being to take you down the path, and number two, you're able to bring so much more into each moment of the practice you do in that way than you could otherwise. Now, could you do that if you don't know what any of the symbols are, or if you can't generate any of the minds associated with those symbols? No. So this is not a beginner's practice. It's an expert's practice. This is why you don't do it in the beginning. This is why you spend 20 years or 15 years or 10 years in a lineage learning all the stuff, marinating in the lineage, and then you move on to this practice, having prepared yourself to take full advantage of all the incredible relationships in terms of meaning, minds that are the path. You know, have you ever felt like you have multiple emotions at the same time? Not conflicting ones, but multiple where you think, I really love my wife and I feel so much and I'm so proud of her. And I hope things go well for her. And I have to think of another one. And I really look up to her in these three or four ways, right? So you can actually, if types of emotional states, mental states aren't contradictory, you can hold multiple mental states at the same time, as long as they're not contradicting each other. So think about this: being able to bring into existence unbelievable symbolically powerful images, internally generate all of the path minds, the actual transformative path minds associated with all of those images simultaneously because they're not contradictory, right? And then in that context, do other practices that are working with your energy system or your body or other things, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that you can bring every layer of your being. Yeah, and she's beautiful. Right, exactly. That's a good one. Every layer of your being taking you down the path in the same direction. You see, this like these are the geniuses of working with ourselves. We're going to take your intellect and use it to make you 100,000 times more effective at doing this. That's why it's faster. But first, you need to do the normal thing, or you can't do that sort of thing, right? Okay. A few questions came in. This has turned into a Q&A somehow. Um, how do you take responsibility for other beings' liberation? You are willing to do whatever it takes to help them. You're not going to leave them languishing. Hell of a multitasking mastery. Yeah, it is. It is. All the advanced practices are basically things you can take into real life, things you can take into areas of your life that you couldn't take your practice into previously, or ways of multitasking with yourself to accomplish way more in the same activities that you would normally not do anything with, to be able to accomplish way more in those circumstances. So, yeah, and again, the five foundations that I teach through my material are meant to help prepare people for that kind of stuff. This is why I teach rumination. Well, if you want to be able to generate your internal state into 14 different beneficial mental states simultaneously on purpose when you want to, wouldn't it be helpful to be able to do it with one mental state when you want to? Because if you can't do that, you're not going to do it with three of them or 10 of them or 20 of them at the same time. So you need to be able to control where your mind goes first. Then you need to be able to make the mind calm. Then you need to be able to make the mind lucid. Then you need to be able to take whatever practices you have onto the road so that you're doing them more or less all the time or as much as you can. And then you need to be able to generate new internal states when you want to so that you can generate the mind into whatever state you want it to be in. So if you have these skills as foundations, and I call them foundations for a reason, these are the foundational cognitive skills I think you need to be successful at this sort of stuff, right? So if you have these foundational skills, then you can put whatever temple you want on top of it. Put the Taoist temple on top, no problem. Put the Buddhist temple, no problem. Put the Christian esoteric temple, no problem. Or just the regular Christian temple if you just want to be a Christian contemplative in whatever tradition you're in, no problem. No problem. You can build whatever you want on this thing, really. Sunny Skies asks, other beings aren't asking for your help. It depends, right? Um, I would put it in the context of relationship. One of my students, for example, asked a while back, because one of the things that happens, my friends, if you get good at this sort of thing, no matter, again, no matter what tradition you're in, if you get good at training your mind, you'll realize that most of the problems people have to do with not being able to control their internal state. I mean, how many times, dear friends, dear audience, have you lost a job or not succeeded in your work because you couldn't control your mind? You couldn't make your mind do what was required to level up. Or you lost control once. You did something bad, whatever it was. You got angry, you got greedy. You lost. You lost because you couldn't control yourself. Man, how many relationships have gone sour because you couldn't control yourself? You had too much lust, you had too much anger, you had too much frustration, you had too much sort of clinginess to weird stuff that freaked someone out. You couldn't control your mind and generate it into what was needed, and therefore you lost. Right? If you get good at training your mind, you'll start to realize that, like, tremendous amounts of what goes wrong in people's lives, not everything, because the real world is, it imposes itself on us from time to time, right? But huge amounts of what goes wrong is just us not being able to control our own internal state. And if you have a heart at all, that's going to move you, and probably it'll piss you off first. It'll frustrate you because you'll go, I know this person would be doing so much better if they would just listen to me and train their mind, and you'll get frustrated. But that's like stage one for most people, I think. And then that matures into stage two, where you develop loving kindness, compassion, etc., and that replaces your frustrations with people. And then that matures also because you can't just have that. You also need to have the capability to help people. So you can't just have. Yeah, in fact, there's a type of compassion in the Buddhist corpus called idiot compassion, and there's quite a bit of this in the world where people really want to help, but they don't know how to help. And there's a funny story. I've told this before. Some of you haven't heard it. This is a classic from the Buddhist classics about idiot compassion. I think it comes out of the Dhammapada explanations. And there's a young woman who's, she's very slow. And her mother, they're poor. And her mother, there are bugs that are biting her mother through her bed, through her blanket at night. And so she tells her daughter, who's again a little bit sort of not very smart, but has compassion, right? She has empathy and cares about other people. So she tells her daughter, she says, "Oh, these bugs, they're getting me over and over again. My daughter, you have to help me. You have to smash all these bugs." And her daughter says, "Okay, I'll do it." And so she picks up the pestle from the mortar and pestle, which I think was either wood or stone. They use it to crush herbs and spices and things. She takes the pestle out of the mortar and pestle, and she starts beating the insects that are on the bedspread, but her mom's under the bedspread, which is like completely thin, right? So she beats these insects until she can't see anymore, but she, in the process, beats her mother to death. And so it's an extreme example, of course, but it shows very clearly and in a way that you'll never forget that just caring enough to even take really radical action, even caring that much that you would be willing to take extremely radical action, isn't enough. You also need to know what to do to help. So you have to develop skill in benefiting other people, helping other people, leading other people to things that are beneficial. So for example, here we are, 240 people have come through this live stream. Not to talk myself up, but I'll talk you through my process of thinking about this. I could have taught Buddhist meditation and just called it all Buddhism, and I could make it only available to Buddhists because I'm a Buddhist and whatever, right? Could have done this. But instead of this, I said, you know what? Meditation, these are cognitive skills. These are, even according to Buddhist psychology, meditative skills aren't Buddhist. They're just a thing that people can do. And if you're Buddhist, you take this thing people can do, which is making the mind extremely sharp, like a extremely sharp knife, and you take this extremely sharp, concentrated mind and you use it to do Buddhist stuff, to put it really bluntly. Okay. So, what I found after many years of practice is that creating this incredibly sharp knife of awareness that you can use to do all this Buddhist stuff, you can do that using the ethical systems found in a lot of places. It doesn't have to be Buddhist ethics. Christians can do it, Hindus can do it, Jains can do it, uh, Buddhists can do it, of course. Sikh, there are great Sikhi meditators. So um, basically, everywhere you look, where they're doing anything that involves mystical practices, if you look and see Kabbalists, Sufis, you find the ingredients that are required, I think, to generate deep states of concentration. And it's through those deep states of concentration that all of the other stuff begins to happen in terms of spirituality and religion. As long as they're not using hallucinogens or just like stress to induce, you know, strange experiences, that's another category. But you find concentration in these traditions. Okay, fine. Well, what if instead of being a Buddhist guy teaching other Buddhists about Buddhist stuff and trying to convince everyone Buddhism is true, how about instead of doing that, I teach 5 cognitive skills that will make you better at absolutely every religious tradition on the planet, because that's true. And then if some of those people along the way want to become Buddhist, great, no problem. But in the meantime, I'm going to hopefully help turn some normal people into people who, for the rest of their lives, will be kind to their own mother, will be helpful to an old lady they see carrying her groceries home alone, who needs help, who, when their neighbor asks for a little bit of money because they fell on hard times, will go, "Yes, of course, no problem." where I'll help people carve their heart into something beautiful, regardless of tradition. Now, as a great bodhisattva, if it turned as a great bodhisattva, that's so terrible. No, no, no. As a really bad baby bodhisattva, that's, sorry, that's a complete slip of the tongue because I'm not a great bodhisattva. But maybe at some point, if I am a great bodhisattva, right? Like 10 lifetimes from now, if I formed connections with, let's call it 500,000 people in this lifetime by training them in meditation, if it turns out that I'm right about this rebirth thing and the Christians are wrong about the heaven thing, then I'll have all of these intricate karmic connections with all these beings in a few lifetimes, and I can start harvesting these connections. Yeah. So if I keep heading down the path, then maybe I can start benefiting these circles of beings that I'm creating connections with now. So I'm not in a hurry. I just give people what they need now and what I can help them with now based on my capabilities and where they're at, and then by building those connections, then at some point maybe it'll blossom into me being able to train them in other things if and when, if and when. Who knows? If the Christians are right, I'm going to hell. So never. But if I'm right about this, then 5 lifetimes, 10 lifetimes, 100 lifetimes down the road, I can start harvesting the crops that are being planted now. You see? So then to bring it down to the level for the people that aren't Buddhist, you just have to develop practical skills for benefiting other people. So when I was in the restaurant business, I studied a huge amount of management theory. And in particular, I wanted to sort out, well, you know, how do you bake the stuff that makes a person better into management theory so that if somebody trains in the management system I'm putting together, they will become basically they'll be on their way to being a great being. And I'm not saying that I was a great manager. I don't think I was actually, but this was my intent. So, how do you take stuff that people are already doing and very invested in and use that as a means to help them transform their character or help them develop concentration, to help them go much deeper than, well, I'm just here to make money or something, right? And this is what the great artists, martial artists, and artists of all kinds in Asia did with all sorts of things. In Japan, making a cup of tea is a way of training your mind. Writing a letter, right? Writing one letter is a way of training your mind. There's a whole system of calligraphy, which when you look at it from the outside, you go, "Oh, it's art," but that art says, like, if we could read it, it says like peanut or something. You know what I mean? It's just a word. So taking the fact that people write words and turning that into something that they can use to transform their entire life, their whole character, that'll change the way they interact with everyone forever. Incredibly skillful. Taking the way that they arrange flowers and put them in a pot and turn it into a whole path of transformation for someone. You see it? So take whatever you're already doing and sort out, without being weird about it, what are the actual things here that lead to someone making progress? I'll give you one example from my management training. Oh. So one thing that happens if you have full engagement, when you have full engagement in movement, is that you move basically like this. See how the whole body sort of goes. So there's a way of walking that relates to a state of mind in which there's intent. The mind is deliberately doing something. You're not going like, right? It's not like a silly wandering sort of thing. It's part of leadership and command is this. Watch. I'll show you 2 walks, okay? I look like someone who doesn't know what he's doing, right? Versus this, right? So one thing I would train my managers to do is if you're not doing anything in particular, stand still. And then when you move, move with intent from one place to the other. Because this communicates to the customers that you know what you're doing. And then they'll feel more comfortable that they don't have to pay attention to everything. They don't have to be worried about what's happening because a competent person is in the room watching, paying attention, moving in a way that shows them that they're paying attention and they care, right? So you can communicate to other people that you're paying attention, you care, you're competent, and you're going to make sure it turns out really well for them, which is part of being a hospitable person in a, running a restaurant, just by how you stand and how you walk before you've said anything to anybody. That's really interesting, right? But also, if you stand that way and walk that way, it will change your character because you do actually have to stand still and watch things, which requires concentration. And you do actually have to have an intent and move somewhere with purpose, which requires you deciding to do something with your mind and your body and then doing it quite deliberately. So these are the basic skills that you need to have to start training in concentration. And then why are you doing all of that? You're doing all of that because you're generating a state of genuine concern for how it turns out for the people who are there at the restaurant, which is like basic training in goodwill. So now I'm training my managers in genuine goodwill, training them in some concentration, training them in ways that are transforming their character. And I didn't have to talk about Buddhism at all. I didn't have to talk about mind training at all, right? I just said, look, people will see you as competent if you stand still and you look around and you're paying attention. And then when you walk from one place to another with intent. And then when you get there, you stop and you do what you were going to do, right? And then stop in places where you can see the dining room so that you can see everyone who's there and make sure that things are going well. And this makes everyone else more comfortable because someone is paying attention and they don't have to. So now I'm helping these people train their character. Yes, they're going to become better managers, but they'll be, hopefully when they go home, they'll be a better husband or a better wife or whatever. Because training your mind to look around calmly and care about how it turns out for other people goes beyond just doing your job. You see? So, whatever situation you're in, do your best for yourself to turn it into training. Do your best. And then also do your best if you're in a position where you're leading other people, helping other people to without being weird about it because some people again they get too weird about it and it doesn't work, but in the best possible most practical way based upon the best information we have about how to do things as a competent person who's doing things, not just weird shit you make up, but real the real and best information we have for doing real things in the world. When you use that information, find the versions of it that transform someone's character, not just make them better at what they do. Now you're benefiting them in a much bigger context. Okay. Uh, Mana asks when to take vows. Yeah, you definitely don't want to take vows unless you think you can keep them. And then you want to have enough. Basically, you want to be at. Here's where I would put you. I would say maybe you don't believe everything yet, but you believe everything enough to know that even if you lived the rest of your life and you couldn't prove it all, you couldn't quite get there, you couldn't quite believe it all, that you're convinced enough of the stuff that's involved in your training that you'll never stop doing that. Does that make sense? You'll never stop your studying because it's so valuable to do the study, even if you don't believe some of the stuff behind the study. You put it on the shelf. You're sort of waiting on one. We'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I'm not saying yes. I'm not saying no. But rebirth, not quite sure. Not saying yes. Not saying no. Karma, not quite sure. But I'm not throwing it away. It's just on the shelf. Um, but you're never going to stop doing your study. You're never going to stop doing your training. This is what you've become fully convinced is the most meaningful possible thing you could be doing, and you will do it until you're dead. I think at that point, you can take your vows. At least your individual liberation vows, the 5 precepts you could take. Um, if you're not convinced of that, it would be better not to take them because it's really bad if you break them or give them all up. But if you did 10 years from now decide, you know what, I can't do this, I want to be Muslim or something, right? Then go back to your preceptor before you give them up and say, will you please release me from these vows? And also, even if you don't believe all this, whatever beings you took those vows in relation to, say, please, I'm asking that you release me from my vows, so that you're not just breaking all the vows, you're giving them back. Yeah, that's important. Of course, it's really bad to do that. You shouldn't do that either, but that's much better than the alternative, which is just lying to all the people or all the beings that you made the vows to by breaking them or not keeping them. Okay, my friends, we have gone a bit over time as we do, but since I missed a couple of days, I think I owed you one or two. So we shall begin again tomorrow at the usual time, 8:30 London time. Thank you for tuning in. Hope to see you again soon. Try not to die before I do. Cheers.